Number one is kind of obvious. Now, what we're talking about are the things that you should consider doing before you get a diagnosis for autism or for Asperger syndrome, which, as you know, is level 1 of autism, high-functioning autism, otherwise known as Asperger syndrome. My name is Ken. I'm pushing 70 years old. I've been there. I've done that my whole life. I've been an Aspie. So whatever state of life you are in right now, chances are I've already been there. So I'm speaking from a perspective of experience. So I just want to share with you what I have learned, but that is not to say that you should not seek counseling and advice from a qualified therapist. So today we're going to talk about some of the things. Well, we've got a list here. I think I've got, 7 things that you need to consider doing before you go in for your diagnosis with a licensed, certified, qualified therapist. Number 1, you're probably already doing this because you're watching this video, and that is familiarize yourself with autism, Asperger's in particular. The reason we say that is so that you can learn about it and compare yourself. And say it one more time. The fact that you're watching this video tells me that you're probably already doing this, but for me, in my experience, this was very valuable because growing up as a young person, I had no idea what Asperger syndrome was. I had no idea what autism was. Never even heard of it. But even later in life, I had no idea. I mean, I've heard of Asperger syndrome, I've heard of Aspies, I've heard of autism, was not that familiar with it. But then I came across somebody on Facebook, a friend, who had been diagnosed with Asperger syndrome. And I asked myself, what is that? So I did some research. And as I was researching, I understood very clearly that they were describing me. It's kind of like somebody had been following me around all my life and picked up on these things. By the way, I did a video on the 16 traits of Asperger syndrome. Then we throw in a few bonus things. So you want to watch that video and familiarize yourself with it as soon as this video is concluded. So familiarize yourself with what it is. Compare yourself with the traits that those who have studied autism, have studied Asperger syndrome, have put together for us, and see, do you think that you are a fit, on the Asperger syndrome and on the autism spectrum, but Asperger's in particular? Number 2 is this, and that is get to know the principal researchers. Get to know the people who are truly qualified, that actually know about Asperger syndrome, about autism, because there are a lot of people. There are a significant number of lay people. Now, I'm not saying they don't know what they're talking about, because some of them do, but then again, some of them are not as qualified as those who have actually done the research. These are the people that I want to hear from. These are the people, and there's nothing wrong with listening to the others because you want a broad spectrum of information from everybody. But these guys in particular, and I named 2 of them here, 2 in particular that you need to understand why they are drawing the conclusions that they have drawn and what those conclusions actually are. The first one is Simon Baron-Cohen. He is British. He was recently knighted for his research efforts on this topic. I mean, you can't get any better than that, in my opinion. He has a lot of information available on YouTube. So if you don't like to read, you can watch and you can listen. The other is Tony Atwood. He has a book called The Complete Guide to Asperger Syndrome. That, I believe, is an absolute positive essential if you really want to know what Asperger syndrome is all about. Now, I say this parenthetically because it comes to mind, but research is ongoing. So what they knew about Asperger syndrome, say 5 or 10 years ago, well, they know more now. And 5 or 10 years from now, they will probably know more. But you need to stay attuned to all of that by qualified professionals who are actually doing the research. And one word of warning. You already know this, but I'm going to tell you anyhow. Our opinions and the opinions of researchers are biased by their personal opinions. Some of these people have religious or sociological or political opinions and views, and they can't help but to express those in their research. And I think everybody does that to some degree, so you can't get away from it. But what you can do is, as you listen to researchers, whether they're people like Simon Baron-Cohen, and Tony Atwood, or whether it's some guy on YouTube like me, we are all biased to some degree, and be careful to keep that in mind so you can look around the bias. Number 3 is this: hang out with like-minded Aspies and like-minded empaths. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. If you're an Aspie, you probably don't hang out with much of anybody. You're pretty much a loner. And that's true. But hey, Facebook, man, there are several groups on Facebook that focus on Asperger syndrome, on empaths, on people who are just quiet. You can find some of those pages and just read what other people are saying, and their insights can be very helpful. There's just something that is very reassuring by knowing that others are right at this very moment facing the very thing that you're facing, enduring the things that you're enduring, the tough times you have at the job, the difficult times you have with your family, with people understanding you. There are many people, I mean a lot of them, who are going through the exact same thing. So you don't have to meet these people eye to eye and face to face if you don't want to. You can find them on the internet. And my favorite place to hang out with these people is on Facebook. And you don't even have to talk to them by leaving comments and messaging. You can just read what they have to say. Very, very helpful, at least to me, and I think it will be helpful to you. So do that before you go get a diagnosis, so you can get a good feel of what the community is all about, and what autism is all about, and what Asperger's syndrome is all about. Number 4 is this: you may want to keep a written journal. Okay, I say written, maybe typewritten. I just go to Notepad or maybe to Google Docs, and I just write down my thoughts. Now, once you do that and you close out your program, you've typed whatever you're going to type, or you've written whatever you're going to write in your notebook or on your device, whatever that is, then maybe a few days later, a couple weeks later, go back and read what you wrote. Now, what I like to do is this. I like to write my thoughts as if I am talking to another person. That is to say, as if I am me listening to someone else say what I have to say, so I can be a little more objective. Now, the reason I say that is sometimes I listen to people on YouTube and elsewhere, and they talk about their difficulties with maybe it's autism, or maybe it's depression, or some other disorder. And when I'm listening to them, I say, man, those people, why do they think that way? Can't they see clearer than that? But then I stop and think, what they're saying is exactly what I think sometimes. So when I do it, and I'm not suggesting you have to do it this way, but just a suggestion for an idea, is when you journal, imagine you are someone else giving you advice upon what you thought. That could help tremendously, but do it however you find it is most convenient for you. So keep a journal. Number 5, 6, and 7. Now these are the most important 3, I believe. 3 things you really need to do before you find or even start looking for a therapist, or at least number 5 and 6, and that is avoid self-masking and self-demasking. Now these are terms I just made up. There's probably official terms for these, but self-masking, by my definition, is when I'm trying to fool myself, not others, but fool myself by masking. For example, okay, I've studied autism, I've studied Asperger syndrome. I know that there are certain traits that are expected of people with Asperger syndrome, and sometimes even subconsciously, I start imitating those traits. That is my understanding of self-masking. self-masking. That's not really me. That's me kind of, and I don't even realize I'm doing it, but I'm kind of pretending that I have Asperger syndrome when I do that. And the other thing is just the opposite, what I call self-demasking. And that is you have traits of Asperger syndrome and you're conscious of it, so you don't do it. So one of the things I find myself doing a lot is rocking back and forth, and I do this pretty much everywhere. But once I get conscious of what I'm doing, I stop doing it. Now, the reason it's important to avoid self-masking and self-demasking is because when you go into a therapist, you want the therapist to see the real you. You don't want to pretend that you have autism. Even subconsciously, you don't want to pretend you have Asperger syndrome. By the same token, self-demasking. You don't want to pretend that you don't have it. You don't want to hide those traits either. So you don't want to display traits that you don't have, or you don't want to repress traits that you do have. You want to be the real you. And sometimes you're not conscious of what you're doing. So we need to focus and be conscious when we do these things or don't do these things. Number 6, I think this is real important. And that is research qualified therapist. There are a lot of people, a lot of therapists out there as you research for these people, and they say that one of the things they specialize in is autism, and one of the things they specialize in is Asperger syndrome. If that is one of the things they specialize in, I don't want to talk to them. I mean, I will if that's the only person available, but I don't want to talk to somebody where autism and Asperger syndrome is one of the things. I want to talk to somebody where it is the only thing they specialize in. Now, the reason for that should be kind of obvious. You want the very best of the very best for a lot of reasons, but the primary reason in my mind is because I know I do these things. I know I do self-masking. I know I do self-demasking. And I want somebody who basically lives with autism and Asperger syndrome. That is to say, not live with it personally, but somebody who lives with people who have it, who are very attuned to what it's like. So if I inadvertently self-mask or I inadvertently self-demask, they will see right through it. They will pick up on that. So I want a therapist who is keenly aware of what they're doing based on constant experience. Now, here's a good analogy that will help explain this. If you work at a bank, you're a teller at a bank, what you do all day is you handle money. Now, maybe 20 years ago, you did this more so than today, but back then, and even today, people handle money all day long. They're very familiar with its form, feel, what it looks like, what the texture is. And if somebody comes in with counterfeit currency, they pick up on it. I mean, it can be, well, it's akin to self-masking. You know, it looks like a $10 bill to anyone else. It feels like a $10 bill. And most anybody would not recognize it. But because the person who works at the bank works with cash all day long, they're far more sensitive to the real thing. And therefore, they are sensitive to the false thing. They are sensitive to self-masking. They are sensitive to self-demasking. And they know what autism spectrum syndrome really looks like. So that's the guy I want to talk to. So one more time, number 6, and again, I think this is the most important one on the entire list, and that is research qualified therapist. Number 7 is this. And this really isn't something you do after you get the diagnosis. This is the diagnosis itself. So get it. Get the diagnosis. Now, why would you do that? I don't know that anybody has to do it. It's not like, maybe in some extreme cases, it's a matter of life or death. It could be a matter of health, but usually if you don't have a diagnosis, you probably do fine. But there are some advantages still of getting a diagnosis. And one of those is identity is essential for healthy self-esteem. It's akin to, have you ever gotten one of those DNA tests, 23andMe or one of those companies? And it's just very reassuring to know who you are, your self-identity. Very, very important. Don't let anybody tell you you are somebody else. Because other people love, you know this, other people love to stick labels on us. They call us names. Usually they're not nice names that they attach on other people. But sometimes they're very complimentary names. They just don't fit. So we need to have a solid, sane, centered is important, centered sense of self-identity to know who we are. And that test, the diagnostic test the therapist gives you will help you get that centeredness so you will know who you are. And if you don't qualify to be on the spectrum, it's nice to know that. Chances are, if you've gone this far, at least in my experience, there are exceptions, but chances are, if you have this much interest in Asperger's syndrome or autism, chances are you are well within the spectrum somewhere. Not necessarily, so that's why you go see a therapist. But the second thing, under number 7, why you want to get an official diagnosis, is so you can explain yourself to others. So they will know, why are you doing what you're doing? Are you being lazy? Are you hypersensitive? Are you being aloof and rude? Why do you do these things? Why is it that you don't like to hang out in a crowded restaurant? Why is it that you sit in the back row in church? Why is it that you may have had a tough time in school, or maybe excelled in school? Is it because you really, really studied hard, or is it because you were lazy and you didn't excel? Or maybe there's some other reason, some neurological reason. Well, this helps explain that. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And above everything else, the most important thing that you can do is accept yourself as you are. The most important thing you can do is accept yourself as you are. Be centered. Don't think better of yourself, more highly of yourself than you are, but certainly don't think any lower. Just accept yourself exactly as you are. Yeah, I know. You may not be the most beautiful woman on the planet. You may not be the world's greatest bodybuilder on the planet. But I'm guessing you're probably not the ugliest woman. You're probably not the skinniest, scrawniest guy on the planet. And if you are, contact Guinness Book of World Records. Maybe they'll pay you something. I don't know how that works. But chances are, you're just a normal person. So accept yourself exactly who you are. Look in the mirror. Say, hey, I'm okay with that. And I'm perfectly okay with it.